Hi everyone, this is Rar again, and today we're launching a new series called The Complete Caro Kann, where I'll be discussing and giving some theory on the main lines. Wait, that doesn't sound good. Wait, just restart. Hi everybody, it's the Rar Attacker again, and today I'm back with a new opening series, The Complete Caro Kann. And today we'll be just looking at some of the basics, but hopefully we're going to make this around a 10 video series or something, covering not just theory, but some very high level games played in this line. Hopefully you can use it to destroy your opponents. So in this introduction today, I actually just want to mainly go over a high-level game that was played in the Caro Kann in a very modern line. And I think hopefully this will just show why the Caro Kann is certainly a very effective opening to try, even at the highest level. So if it's good at the highest level, then you can be sure it's good enough to be played in your terrible games. So actually, let's just get into the game here. And this game was played between Nepomniachtchi and Carlsen, so I guess potential world championship match, right? I mean, I assume it's going to happen later this year. I really don't think Carlsen won't show up because he gets like $1 million to play, and the fact that he's making this a big deal, maybe he'll get paid even more by some like rich billionaire who really wants him to play the match. And I mean, so yeah, I think that's probably mainly just as a troll, right? Because Carlsen, I guess, once you're a world-class chess player, you might as well become a world-class troll. But anyways, this game was actually played 6 years ago in the World Rapid Championship in 2016. But this is not just a normal boring game. It's a very interesting one. Going into this round, in round 14, it's a 15-round tournament, the World Rapid. The Nepomniachtchi is leading the field by a full point. He had 10 out of 13, and Magnus Carlsen, Ivanchuk, and a bunch of other players had 9 out of 13. So that made this game a must-win, right? Like, let's say Carlsen doesn't win this game. If he drew Nepomniachtchi, Nepomniachtchi would be up at least, he'd probably be up, a half a point in the field, and a last round draw would get him at least first, tied first, maybe even clear first. But for Carlsen, this is a must-win, right? Because if he draws the game and he's a whole point behind Nepomniachtchi, there's just no way he wins this tournament. And he's playing black, so this seems annoying, right? You're playing a top player, you're playing black. Well, for Carlsen, it's not that big of a deal, because what do you play when you need to win with the black pieces? Apparently the Caro Kann. And little did these players know that in 6 years they'd be playing a world championship match. So let's take a look at the game. So Carlsen, he knows it must be a good opening, right? Because in the highest level in the World Rapid, he's willing to play the Caro Kann. For those of you that don't know what it is, the Caro Kann is e4 and c6. And why is this move played? Well, there's a few ideas, but the main point is black wants to stake a stake in the center with d5 without blocking his bishop, right? This can often be compared to the French defense, where black plays e4, so e6, I mean, but unfortunately the bishop is blocked, right? d4, d5, and it's a pretty solid position for black, but white does have the nice advantage of keeping this bishop miserable, at least for a while. The Caro Kann doesn't have that problem. When you play d5, you're not blocking your bishop. And also, you might even keep the idea of e5 more alive, right? Because once you play e6, you're not playing e5. In the Caro Kann, there are lines if white does not play d4, black playing e5 is a credible threat, right? Which sort of limits white's options. In fact, I would say maybe white's options are a little bit more limited in the Caro Kann than the French, because in the French, white can just do whatever he wants. At least here, white has to be a little worried about e5 happening. And yeah, the basic idea is black's going to get in the center without blocking his bishop. White played the move knight c3. As we can see, this was only the third most common game in the Lichess database. In the Masters, it's the second most common. But the idea of this move is white's trying to take advantage of the fact that this is not a developing move. He wants to develop as quickly as possible and try to, and again, it might transpose into the main line, but white is just trying to show that this is perhaps not the best try. Knight c3 is a very critical move. We'll take a look at this in a later chapter. I would say besides the main line and maybe the advanced variation, it's probably white's best try for the advantage. But black plays d5 anyways, and white plays knight f3. This is his point. He probably will play d4 anyway, so honestly, this is more of a move order trick than anything. But, it is reasonable just to develop your pieces. And here, d4 is the main line by white. And this is probably what you'll play most of the time if you play the Caro Kann. And this will transpose into this game. Black takes, white has to take back. And after knight f6, we'll transpose into the game. White will take. And then after knight f3, this is exactly what we happen to have in the game. So this is actually why this main line I'm recommending for black in the Caro Kann here, which is, d takes e4. Well, okay, after knight f3. This is very effective because this line works against both the two knights variation and the classical main line. So with knight f3 here, black takes an e4. First, makes sense. We're just trading center pawns. And after knight f6, black is prioritizing quick development. And if white doesn't do anything, for instance, if he moves the knight back, then he's probably wasting time and black has easy play. So white probably should take this knight here. And after e takes f6, this might seem like a surprising move, but it's actually very effective. G takes f6 used to be more common, but e takes f6 is a better move. Black is saying, I'm going to develop, right? Now, Black has allowed himself to get inferior pawn structure, right? If there's a king and pawn endgame and we trade off all the pieces, White will have 4 versus 3 in the queen side, and Black will have 3 versus 4, but he won't be able to force the pass pawn with his majority. That's actually definitely a disadvantage. But who are we kidding here? Only one pair of pieces have been traded. How is this going to get to a king and pawn endgame? Black, meanwhile, has a lot of benefits from this pawn structure. As long as we don't get into a king and pawn endgame, he has every chance to get a good position. For one thing, this supposedly useless f6 pawn is pretty good. It destroys that knight in f3, right? This piece is very miserable. And we should also imagine what White's plan is here, right? White is going to try to push these pawns in order to take advantage of having an extra one. But he has to do this in the right order. As we'll see in the game here, if he plays c4 and d5, for instance, Black might play the move c5, right? And then he'll blockade the pawn, and he'll be pointing his pieces at the king side. And Black's plan is simple. He'll play bishop d6, castle, and then figure out what to do. If White castles king side, well, we can just try to attack them, right? And again, this pawn in f6 is really useful. There's never any knight e5 ideas by White. And that really just makes it easier for Black to attack. Right? We can even imagine maybe later on if we have very good piece placement, even g4 to try to kick this knight away. The attack is definitely not dead. But as usual, this is sort of looking far ahead in the game. Let's just look at specifics in a specific line here because, at this point, anything's possible. White played d4. Now he transposed the main line. Bishop d6. Obviously, Black is just developing and preparing to castle. So that's what happened. White played bishop e2. And this is probably not the most critical line by White because after both sides castled, this is pretty simple for Black to play. And why is this not as critical? This was played 6 years ago when this line was not that popular. And let's just take a look and try to understand this middle game. Probably understand perhaps why it's really not better for White and why White players don't go for this anymore. Because I would say once both sides castle, this is probably one of the first times in the chess game that I start to take a long think. Because obviously once both sides castle, their kings won't just jump to the other side of the board. So you can sort of get a good idea of whether you can launch an attack or not. And Black's pieces are definitely aimed to be attacking White. Queen c7 will simply already put pressure on h2, and those guys will be pointed at the king. We can imagine this bishop probably going to g4, this knight to d7, this rook to e8, and, our pieces are just generally playing in the king side, right? White, meanwhile, is going to try to use his queen side pawns. He's going to either go c6, c4, and d5, or even just go for b4, b5 ideas. And he's going to try to trade off these pawns, give himself a pass pawn, and then use that pass pawn to make us passive and then try to beat us like that, right? So that makes sense. So in order for Black to make this attack work, Black needs to provoke these pawns forward, right? If they just stay where they are, it might be a little difficult to attack, although maybe not impossible. But first of all, let's just get our pieces more active. Carlsen played the move rook e8. And, okay, why is Lichess restarting in 9 minutes? Does that mean I have to finish this game really soon? Okay, how dare Lichess do that to me? Does anyone else see this? Lichess is saying it's restarting in 9 minutes. Okay, let's just hurry up this video. It's probably been too long anyways. I want to mention here that bishop g4 is also a totally fine move. White's structure looks great here, but who cares, right? Chess is about the pieces, not the pawns. And White's pieces, they're okay, but they're certainly not superior to Black's. Black has great bishops. After rook e8, Magnus is simply positioning this rook on a good square. And this also vacates the f8 square, which is a very important square that Black needs to use, right? This knight is not necessarily that great sometimes, but look at this plan that Magnus is about to do. Very nice maneuver that you definitely want to be aware of if you play this opening. It's very important to know in many openings how to get this knight to the king side, right? We're trying to attack here. This knight needs to find his way there. So White put his bishop there, knight f8. And as we can see here, White was already a little concerned about some of the pressure if he played h3 to stop bishop g4. The problem is it weakens the dark squares, right? These squares are now not as dangerous, and we can already imagine that maybe Magnus can try to put a knight on the f4 square, which is what he goes for. If the knight is here, this sort of exploits the weaknesses here. White doesn't want to play g3 anymore because that would weaken h3. So White's not going to be able to push these pawns much anymore. Anyhow, White played queen c2, stopping knight f4 at the moment, and trying to trade off light squared bishops. He wants to just trade off and go into the pawn endgame, right? He's just thinking, I'll trade off anything, I'll be happy. And here, Magnus played queen a5. This is trying to get the queen in the attack. If Carlsen is able to, he'll actually just swing his queen to h5. For instance, bishop g2, which would not be a good move, queen h5, and already Black might sacrifice an h3. And I'm not even joking. Like, if White literally does nothing, like, what's a nothing move? Okay, let's put a nothing reasonable move. Bishop takes h3, and Black's completely winning. I don't know if it cares whether you trade or not. Let's say you don't trade. But the point is you can even just take an f3. So that bishop takes h3 is not even a sacrifice. It literally just wins a pawn. And so we might think, okay, well, how is White going to defend against that? That's actually really annoying. For instance, he definitely doesn't want to move his knight back. That would be very bad. And we could still sacrifice an h3 anyways, because this time the knight's attacked. I guess f4 is the only way to try to defend. But again, that pawn is still attacked too much. And we can sort of see here what might happen, right? Black simply got his pieces positioned for a good attack. Now he's 3 pawns for the piece, and he's just much better here. Although, okay, it's not checkmate, but he's definitely better here. So white better be careful. He didn't want that to happen. That's why he played c5. He's like, Magnus, no, you're not attacking me. I will try to attack you in the queen side, which again, makes sense. But this is a very strategically double-edged move. Because look at the d5 square. Suddenly, this is free for black to steal. And that's the problem for white, right? In fact, there are some positions where we have this pawn structure that black will sometimes play b5 just to get this pawn to move so that the knight can go to d5 later on. A very serious plan and very annoying for white. Anyway, bishop d8 was played. And now after bishop d2, black played queen d8. And you might think, what is black doing, right? After all, who puts all their pieces on the back rank? But, Magnus is Magnus, and you are nobody. And there probably is a good reason for that. Never underestimate the world champion and never question him. But okay, on a serious note, there's nothing inherently wrong with having your pieces in the back. It's all about what they do, right? If your pieces are in the back rank and your opponent's king is like right here, well, then those are the greatest pieces ever. You just checkmate it, right? But here, these pieces aren't that bad. These bishops are pointed, and they will also get developed. So the main problem if your pieces are in the back is that your opponent might checkmate you, or they'll start taking all your pawns or something. But, that's not going to happen. White has really no threats, which is sort of a problem with the setup. Black is super solid. I mean, he's not getting attacked here. So the fact that his pieces are in the back doesn't hurt him at all. This is actually a really good pawn structure when it comes to defending the king. Anyway, white played rook f1, getting his rook in the game, bishop e6. And, the bishop might be good in d5, but black is mainly just trying to get his pieces off the back to get this really bad rook in the game. And this pawn is a superhero, stopping this knight from ever advancing. White played bishop d4 here, which is probably his first mistake. The problem with this move is this bishop is probably, this is definitely white's better bishop. This bishop is bad, right? It's blocked behind these pawns. That makes this bishop the good bishop. And by getting rid of it, white has less control of d5. So black was happy with this trade. That's why he played knight f8, preparing to recapture with the knight. And in fact, that is exactly what he would have done if Nepomniachtchi had taken on e6. After knight takes e6, suddenly this backward pawn becomes a huge disadvantage. We thought this was white's advantage, right? The fact he has an extra d pawn, but not anymore. Let's just go ahead and target that pawn and, rook a d8. White's just worse here. He can defend, but obviously we'd rather be black. So white played rook a d1, maybe sort of anticipating some of these ideas. Black got his bishop back in the game. White played queen b3, sort of forcing the trade, which is strange because this trade has clearly helped Magnus. d4 is an easier target. And now black might even be happy trading off minor pieces. Because if he does that, he can just put all his rooks and queens on this file. He could put a rook on d5 and get all the pressure. But first, Carlsen played queen d7, connecting the rooks. Nepomniachtchi finally starts his attack, and knight g6 is played, maneuvering the knight to d5. Pretty harsh. And Carlsen also had another good passive advantage by targeting the d4 pawn. He could have traded rooks, played knight e6, and rook d8. And this would also be very nice for him. So as we can see here, white's whole queenside attack is just not doing anything. But white had to try to attack anyways. Black put a knight in d5. And okay, white's not technically worse here, despite the fact he definitely is a harder position to play. But he has to play much better and much more accurately here if he wants to maintain equality. And he was unable to do so in the game. Because this knight in d5, it really restricts this bishop. And if black is given time, he's going to start an attack now. And this is not a joke. Because white's pieces are not very good at defending. This bishop is bad. The knight is sort of a target. And the queen is strangely out of the game, kind of. It's actually really hard for it to find its way to the queen's king side, because black's pieces are really good at controlling the key squares. So white thought, let me go after the c6 pawn, sorry. And this seems to make sense, but look at the problem now. This queen went to one side of the board, away from the king, so what does Magnus do? g5. This is dangerous. h5, g4, it would be a pretty annoying threat if it happened, but probably Magnus might even preempt it with moves like queen f5. Also stuff like king g7, and then getting this rook to h8. This can become a very nasty attack on the h file. So Carlsen knows what he's doing, and Nepomniachtchi thought, don't attack me, and he played knight h2, which makes some sense, right? It does stop g4. But now Carlsen, just being an amazing world champion, and I think he just does something here that most of us just would not even think of. He immediately goes from attacking mode with g5 to positional mode all the way again. He just took on h2, and suddenly what happened is black just had a much better minor piece endgame. Take a look at this. This knight dominates the terrible bishop. Sure, you won't checkmate white for now, because this bishop does at least block the knight, but this is terrible for white. This knight is great. These pawns are not doing anything, and basically blocks almost up a piece effectively. I mean, this is basically a fake bishop. Calling it a bishop is silly. I would call this a wish-up. It wishes to be a bishop, but, it obviously is nothing close to an actual one. I mean, black's pawns and white's pawns team up together to put this thing in jail. So not recommended. And black just played the simple king g7. And this is the problem with white. White took a risk when he put his pawns in d4 and c5. This pretty much begged for a knight to get here, and Magnus has just instructively outplayed his opponent. So what does white do here? It's a good question. I'm not really sure. It might seem natural to try to go for play in the b file, for instance, by taking and playing rook b1. But this completely abandons the king, right? And this is the problem for white. He can't really do that. Black says, okay, thanks. Let me get some crazy play. And if you take this pawn c6, thinking queen takes f2, and then queen takes d5, well, rook e2, and we're probably seeing what's going to happen here. Carlsen might not be up a pawn, but he's definitely going to be up a king pretty soon. So, seeing these ideas, Nepomniachtchi played king g1. Now queen f5 won't work. But black now took over the g file. He took, and after rook b8, black's going to be the one dominating. And we might think, oh boy, look at this rook in e1. Well, actually, no. This is a completely useless open file. With only one rook left, white's not going to be able to defend his weaknesses, and this black rook is going to start infiltrating. So white had no way of stopping the infiltration, so it happened. And now, after h5, h6, I mean, might as well make the opponent miserable. Queen b7 immediately was also good to get the queen in the game, but why not make white realize how hopeless this position really is? So white attacked the rook went away, and then black simply brought the queen in the game. If a rook on the 7th is good, then how about a queen in the 7th? That's what happened. Queen b2. And after bishop e1, white is barely defending. As we can see here, all of black's pieces are perfect and improved to their maximum. That means it's time for a breakthrough, right? Generally, you want to keep improving pieces and then destroy the opponents. Once you're already at the point where everything is great, look for the attack. And that's what black did. Knight f4, and nothing can hold together the position. Queen a6 is played. And actually, queen takes d4, taking a free pawn, was not actually the best try by black, I mean. Better was actually rook a8-1, and then taking, keeping this bishop miserable. But suffice to say, white is still in a terrible position. And after he missed one really last brilliant try to get back in the game with rook g8 check, the game was over. Now, rook g8 check is just a really lucky engine try. The point is, rook takes g6. And if f takes g6 is played, queen e6 threatens the rook and perpetual check, so that would get the draw. Again, complete engine mania. So instead, king takes g6, queen g8 check, and the king is forced to go on a walk. And okay, white is still probably losing here, but this was his last hope. In the game, he took on c6, taking back the pawn, but now after rook a1, the bishop is kept under pressure, and it's terrible. And really, white is not going to be able to defend either of these pawns. These pawns are both terrible, and black's just going to go after them. Rook c1, take that thing, or go behind this and take that. That's what ends up happening. Queen e4 was played, and this move, I guess is trying to trade off queens, but it just lets black take back the pawn. The more natural try might be the move rook e3, hoping to hold on to everything, but this just doesn't really work. Black has the really nice queen b4, and the bishop is pinned, so it obviously can't do anything, pretty much forcing king f1, and then black just grabs the pawn. And now black's going to use the a pawn to win, but he can also just do rook c1 and grab the c pawn, where he's up 2 pawns and has this OP passer and still has the great knight. Queen e4 is played instead, but again, now black took, and he's up a pawn. He has a better minor piece. He's going to win another pawn. It's a completely losing position. So, well, let's see Carlsen's technique, but nothing too incredible here. Okay, h5, just go for the attack. Rook a4. Again, none of these moves are too important, and they're both low on time. But now, after f3, which is probably not a great move by white, rook a2, and here comes knight f4. So he had to try to get out of that threat. Rook c2, bishop e1. And, I mean, I guess the point is you don't want to go knight f4 yet. You could do that, but I guess bishop g3 might complicate it. But even this would still be winning. There's just too many ways of winning. Carlsen found a different one. Queen b5, threatening that. Bishop g3, apparently, yeah, I guess you don't need to be worried about that yet. But h4, the bishop is forced back. And then queen b1 check. And finally, after bishop g1, queen f1, Nepomniachtchi resigns, seeing he has no way of stopping mate without giving up all his pieces. And this was a critical win for Carlsen, actually. Once he won this game, he was tied with Nepomniachtchi with 10 out of 14 going into this last round. And in the last round, Carlsen went on to win. And Ivanchuk and Grishuk also won their games. And they were also in that big 5-way tie. And this actually made them the co-champs in the World Rapid. Carlsen was only 3rd place by tiebreak. And Ivanchuk and Grishuk were 1st and 2nd, respectively. But all we got to say is Nepomniachtchi must hate the Caro Kann, right? All he needed was a draw to win the World Rapid. And he was playing white. But Carlsen said, nope, I will play the best must-win opening, the Caro Kann, and destroy my opponent. Okay, not all of that was true, but we got to hype the Caro Kann, right? So hopefully this game showed you that the Caro Kann is certainly not a boring opening, and it is filled with fight if you're willing to make it an exciting opening. That's why in our next video, we'll continue looking at the Caro Kann and probably looking at more theory this time. But I just hope this introduction game was a really good one, right? Because when we look at this position from first sight, it really seems like white must be better. You think, okay, I mean, look at the extra pawn on the queen side. Doesn't this look more comfortable? But I think Magnus put some of these ideas to rest, right? I mean, obviously, this is just one game, but he played around it. He had very active bishops the entire time. And eventually, he even had ideas of g5 starting an attack, right? And white's queenside play, while at first it looked dangerous, was sort of met pretty well, right? c5 made sense, but that just gave black a free target to play on the d5 square. And as we end up realizing, it's just another game, right? Obviously, this is not better for black. The Caro Kann is just as sound as the French and any other opening. And indeed, Carlsen was able to outplay his opponent, just like you RARs can outplay your opponents by intimidation and threats. And that is what I expect you all to do. In fact, I'm probably threatening and bribing you all to, leave comments in this video. So do that right now. Show your loyalty, like and subscribe, and we will be back with another video to finish this series.